The voicemail arrives on a Tuesday afternoon, and Inez almost deletes it before she finishes listening. She is standing in her kitchen, still wearing the dress she wore to work, one hand on the counter, because something about the voice on the other end, a mutual friend, someone she has known for years, makes her need to steady herself. The friend is gentle. That's how Inez knows it's bad. "I just thought you should know what's being said. I don't believe it, but I thought you should know." What's being said is this. Inez is jealous. Inez has always been jealous. Inez spent the entire wedding weekend making everything about herself. And the bride, her best friend since college, the woman she held while she cried over a canceled venue and a missing florist, and a mother who wouldn't stop critiquing the seating chart, that bride has been telling people Inez couldn't be trusted around the groom. That last part lands differently. Inez doesn't move. She doesn't call the friend back. She stands in her kitchen and lets the words arrange themselves in her mind, one by one, like tiles on a board she is only now seeing from above. Jealous, untrustworthy, around the groom. She thinks about the groom, a man named Patrick, and she thinks about the one thing she knows about him that the bride, a woman named Meredith, does not. She has held that thing for 11 months. She held it through the engagement party and the bridal shower and the rehearsal dinner. Through every single moment, Meredith looked at her and said, "You're the only one who really gets me." She held it because she believed she was protecting something, someone. Now she is standing in her kitchen, and the thing she protected is being used to erase every single thing she actually did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that voicemail, before the kitchen floor became the place where a 17-year friendship cracked open, there is the story of how Inez and Meredith became the kind of friends who thought nothing could touch them. And that story starts exactly where you'd expect, with a girl who needed saving and the friend who never stopped showing up. Inez met Meredith in her sophomore year of college. They were assigned to the same dorm floor, 2 doors apart, and Inez heard Meredith before she saw her. A laugh that filled the hallway, a voice that could make a room full of strangers feel like they'd been invited to something. Meredith had that particular kind of magnetism, the kind that doesn't ask for attention so much as assume it will arrive. And it did. It always did. Inez was quieter. Not shy, she has never been shy, but careful. She watched a room before she walked into it. She noticed who was left out of the conversation, who was standing at the edge, who was pretending to check their phone because they didn't know where to put their hands. She was the one who would drift toward that person and say something small, something that made them belong. That was her gift. She didn't advertise it, she just did it. Meredith noticed. Meredith noticed everything about the people who noticed her, and what she noticed about Inez was this. Inez was steady. Inez would answer the phone at 2 in the morning. Inez would drive 40 minutes to bring her soup when she was sick. Inez would listen to the same crisis 6 times without once saying, "We've been through this." And Meredith needed that. She needed it constantly. She was a woman in a state of perpetual emergency. Bad boyfriends, worse decisions, friends who betrayed her in spectacular and detailed ways that always required hours of unpacking. Inez became the unpacker, the steady one, the friend who showed up. For 17 years, that was the shape of them. When Meredith's first serious relationship collapsed, Inez was the one who sat on the bathroom floor with her. When Meredith decided to go back to school for her master's degree, Inez proofread every application. When Meredith met Patrick at a work event 5 years ago and declared within 3 weeks that he was the one, Inez was the first person she called. "He's different," Meredith said. "He's solid. He's like you." That word, solid. Inez heard it and felt something she could not quite name. Something between pride and a very quiet, very distant warning bell. She pushed the bell aside. That's what she had been trained to do. That's what the friendship required. Meredith needed steadiness, and Inez provided it. And the arrangement worked because Inez believed, truly, deeply believed, that love meant absorbing the things other people couldn't hold. She did not yet understand that absorption has a cost, that carrying someone else's weight for 17 years does not make them grateful. Sometimes it makes them certain that your arms exist only for their luggage. Patrick proposed on a beach in the Outer Banks. Meredith sent Inez a video of the moment. Shaky footage, the ring catching the light, Meredith's voice breaking as she said yes. Inez watched it 4 times in a row. She cried. She called Meredith immediately and screamed with her. And when Meredith asked her to be maid of honor, Inez said yes before the question was finished. She threw herself into the role. She organized a bridal shower that took 3 months to plan, a garden party with individual potted succulents as favors, each one labeled with a guest's name in Meredith's handwriting, which Inez had learned to forge just so it would feel personal. She negotiated with vendors. She mediated between Meredith and her mother, a woman named Celeste who had opinions about everything and approval about nothing. She absorbed Meredith's late-night panic calls about the seating chart, the color scheme, the napkin rings, the weight of the fondant on the cake. "I don't know how you do it," people said to her. "You're so calm." Inez wasn't calm. She was focused. There's a difference. Calm is peace. Focused is just velocity with a target. And Inez's target was getting Meredith to the altar without the whole thing collapsing under the weight of its own emotional architecture. The wedding was beautiful. A September evening, string lights, Meredith in a dress that took her mother's breath away. Finally something Celeste approved of. Inez gave a speech that made half the room cry. She told the story of meeting Meredith in that dorm hallway, of hearing that laugh, of knowing within a week that she had found her person. She raised a glass to Patrick and said, "Take care of her. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Meredith hugged her so hard afterward that Inez's ribs ached. 3 days later, Inez found out what Meredith had been saying about her during the entire wedding weekend. It started with a text. A bridesmaid named Sloane, someone Inez had met exactly twice, sent her a message that read, "Hey, I think you should know some things are being said. I don't agree with it, but it's happening." Then the voicemail from the mutual friend. Then a phone call from another bridesmaid who had heard Meredith say during the reception that Inez had been a lot during the planning process, that she had been too involved, that she had opinions about everything, that she was clearly struggling with the fact that Meredith was moving into a new chapter without her. And then the part that made Inez's stomach drop. Meredith had told several people, quietly, confidentially, the way you share something you're almost reluctant to say, that she didn't feel entirely comfortable with how Inez acted around Patrick, that Inez was always finding reasons to be near him, that she had noticed Inez looking at him a certain way, that she wasn't accusing anyone of anything, but she just wanted people to be aware. Inez reads these messages in her kitchen, and she does not cry. She does not scream. She does not call Meredith and demand an explanation. She sits down. She puts her phone on the counter. She breathes for what feels like the first time in 17 years. Because here is what Meredith does not know. Here is the thing Inez has been holding since before the engagement, since before the proposal on the beach, since before Meredith looked at her and said, "He's like you." 11 months ago, Inez saw Patrick at a restaurant. He was not alone. He was with a woman Inez did not recognize, and he was holding her hand across the table, and he was looking at her the way a man looks at someone he has been with for a long, long time. Inez didn't confront him. She didn't tell Meredith. Not yet. Not without being absolutely certain. She told herself she was gathering information. She told herself she was protecting her friend from a bomb that might not even be real. She told herself a lot of things. But the real reason she stayed quiet is simpler and harder to say. She knew Meredith. She knew that if she brought this to her without ironclad proof, Meredith would not believe her. Meredith would believe Patrick. Because Meredith had always chosen the person who made her feel like the center of the universe. And Patrick was an expert at that. And the pattern, the one Inez is only now starting to see, is that Meredith also had a habit of rewriting stories about the people who got too close to the truth. Inez doesn't call Meredith. She doesn't call anyone, actually. She sits in her kitchen for an hour, then 2. And the thing she keeps coming back to is not the lie itself. It's the specificity of it. Jealous, untrustworthy, around the groom. These are not vague accusations. They are carefully chosen arrows, each one aimed at a particular version of Inez that never existed, but that Meredith needed people to believe in. And that's when the first real crack opens. Not in the friendship. That crack has been there for years. Hairline, invisible, waiting for weight. The crack opens in the story Inez has been telling herself about who Meredith actually is. Because if Meredith is willing to invent this version of Inez, a woman who would covet her husband, a woman who would make someone else's wedding about her own bitterness, then Inez has to ask herself a question she has never allowed herself to ask before. Has Meredith done this to other people? She scrolls back through 17 years of memory, and the answer is sitting right there. It has always been sitting right there. There was a woman named Esme. Esme was Meredith's best friend before Inez, a co-worker from her first job, the one who taught her how to navigate office politics, and who let Meredith sleep on her couch for 6 weeks after a breakup. Inez remembers Esme from the early days of their friendship, a warm woman with an easy laugh who would show up to parties with homemade food and leave early because she had kids at home. And then, around the time Inez and Meredith were becoming inseparable, Esme disappeared. Meredith told her why. Esme had become competitive. Esme was threatened by Meredith's success. Esme had said something unforgivable that Meredith could never quite specify. Inez accepted this. She had no reason not to. She had seen Esme only through Meredith's eyes, and those eyes had already moved on. Then there was a graduate school friend named Priya. Meredith and Priya were inseparable for 2 years. Study sessions, weekend trips, a shared language of inside jokes that Inez watched from a slight distance, never jealous, just observing. And then Priya was gone too. The story this time? Priya had been talking behind Meredith's back. Priya had been jealous of Meredith's relationship with a professor. Priya had, in some murky and never quite articulated way, betrayed her. Inez thinks about Priya now, thinks about how she never once questioned the story, how she simply absorbed Meredith's version and closed the door on a woman she had liked, a woman who had never been anything but kind to her. The pattern is so obvious once you tilt your head. Meredith does not lose friends. Meredith discards them, quietly, efficiently, with a story already prepared. And every single story follows the same architecture. The friend became jealous. The friend couldn't handle Meredith's happiness. The friend did something that violated trust. The specifics change. The shape never does. Inez was never the exception. She was just the one who lasted longest, because she was the one who made herself the most useful. This is the moment, right here, in the kitchen, with her phone face down on the counter, that Inez begins to feel something shift inside her. It is not anger yet. Anger will come later, and when it does, it will be enormous. What she feels now is quieter and, in some ways, more destabilizing. She feels the architecture of her memory rearranging itself. Every single time she defended Meredith to someone who had doubts, every single time she absorbed a crisis, managed a meltdown, held the line while Meredith fell apart. Every single time she told herself, this is what friendship looks like. This is what loyalty costs. She wasn't being loyal. She was being managed. And the wedding? The event she poured 3 months of her life into, the event that nearly broke her, was not the culmination of a friendship. It was the final extraction. Meredith had gotten everything she needed from Inez, and the only thing left to do was dispose of the evidence. So she built a story that would make Inez the villain, handed it to her bridal party like a party favor, and moved on without a backward glance. But she forgot one thing. She forgot the restaurant. Inez had never planned to keep Patrick's secret forever. She had told herself she was waiting for the right moment. She had told herself she was gathering information. But the truth she can finally admit now, sitting in the dim light of her kitchen, is that she was afraid. Not of Patrick, of Meredith. Afraid that if she brought this forward without evidence so airtight it could survive a hurricane, she would become the next Esme, the next Priya, the next name on the list of women who supposedly couldn't handle Meredith's happiness. And now, she has become that name anyway. The story has already been told. The accusation has already been planted. Meredith has already done to Inez what she did to every friend who ever got too close to something real. So the equation has changed. Inez has nothing left to lose by telling the truth. If you're watching this and you've ever had a friendship that felt more like a job you couldn't quit, a job where the performance review was always just around the corner and somehow never quite arrived, I want you to hit subscribe. Because what Inez does next is something most people never get to see. A woman who realizes that the worst thing her friend could do to her has already been done, and the only direction left to move is forward. Inez picks up her phone. She doesn't call Meredith. She opens a different thread, a group chat that includes 2 of the bridesmaids who reached out to her, the ones who said, "I don't believe it, but I thought you should know." She types one sentence. She doesn't over-explain. She doesn't defend herself. She simply writes, "Before you believe anything else she says about me, I need to show you something." And then she begins to tell them. Not the whole story, not yet, but just enough that they understand the conversation they need to have is not about Inez's supposed jealousy. It's about what Inez saw in that restaurant 11 months ago and why she kept quiet. And what Patrick is going to do when he finds out that the woman he thought was too afraid to speak is no longer afraid of anything. The group call happens that night. Inez doesn't plan it that way. She sends the message and expects silence, the kind of silence that follows a grenade, the long pause while people decide whether to pick it up or run. But within 20 minutes, one of the bridesmaids responds, then another. Then Sloane, the one who sent the first text, calls Inez directly and says, "I'm coming over. Send me your address." By 8 o'clock, Inez is sitting on her couch with Sloane on one side and a woman named Keisha, another bridesmaid, someone Inez had barely spoken to during the wedding weekend, on the other. A third bridesmaid, a cousin of Meredith's named Tessa, joins by video call. Her face is pale, her mouth set in a hard line that Inez recognizes. It's the line of someone who has been told a story about a person and is now hearing a different one. "Tell us," Sloane says, "from the beginning." So Inez does. 11 months earlier, she was meeting a friend for dinner at a restaurant downtown. The kind of place with low lighting and high prices. The kind of place you go when someone else is paying. She was walking toward the back, toward the table where her friend was waiting, when she passed a booth near the window. Patrick was sitting in that booth. He was not alone. The woman across from him was tall, dark-haired, somewhere in her early 40s. She was wearing a wedding ring. Not the one Meredith had. Inez knew that ring, had helped Meredith clean it with a tiny brush after it got lotion caught in the setting. This was a different ring entirely. A different hand, a different person. And Patrick was holding that hand across the table with the kind of familiarity that doesn't belong to a first meeting or a casual drink. Inez stopped walking. She stood there, half hidden by a decorative partition, and watched Patrick lean forward and say something that made the woman laugh. A private laugh. a laugh that had history in it. Then he lifted her hand and kissed it. Inez did not confront him. She did not take a photo, not that night. She turned around, walked back to the front of the restaurant, and told the hostess she had the wrong location. Then she sat in her car for 40 minutes and tried to figure out what to do. Here is what she knew about Patrick. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. Not the loud charm of a man who needs to be the center, but the quieter kind. The kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room who matters. He was good at eye contact. He remembered small details. He asked questions about your life and followed up on them weeks later. And when he did, you felt seen in a way that made you want to trust him. Inez had always liked Patrick. That was the problem. She liked him, and she had never seen this side of him. And the cognitive dissonance of the man at the restaurant versus the man who brought Meredith tea when she was stressed was so jarring that for the first few days, she nearly convinced herself she had misunderstood. But she hadn't misunderstood. She knew she hadn't. And she knew Meredith well enough to know that bringing this to her without proof would not just be useless, it would be dangerous. For Inez. So she did something she had never done before. She hired a private investigator. This is the part of the story that Inez has never told anyone, not a single soul. She says it now, in her living room, and watches the faces of Sloane and Keisha and the tiny version of Tessa on the phone screen. And she sees the exact moment they understand that this is not a rumor or a suspicion or a story Inez invented to defend herself. This is documented. The investigator, a woman named Roberta, who had been doing this work for 20 years and had seen everything, took 3 weeks. She came back with photographs, financial records, a timeline. The woman's name was Lydia Vance. She was a real estate agent in a neighboring city. She had been involved with Patrick for at least 2 years, possibly longer, Roberta said. But 2 years was what she could confirm without a doubt. Patrick would meet her on days he told Meredith he was working late. He would meet her on weekends he claimed to be visiting his brother. He had a separate credit card, a separate email address, and an entire separate life that ran parallel to the one Meredith believed she was living. And here was the thing that Inez could not get past, the detail that made her stomach turn every time she thought about it. Lydia Vance was married too. She had a husband and 2 children. Patrick was not just cheating on Meredith. He was participating in the slow-motion destruction of an entire family. And he was doing it with the same calm, attentive kindness he brought to everything else. Inez had the file. She had the photographs. She had a folder on her laptop that could end Patrick's marriage and Lydia's marriage and everything both of them had built on the lie. And she did nothing. For 11 months, she did absolutely nothing. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, she says, her voice steady but low. I told myself I was protecting her. I told myself the wedding was too close, then the honeymoon was too fresh, then the timing was never right. But that wasn't it. I was afraid. I knew if I was the one who told her, she would never forgive me. She would believe him over me. She would burn me. Keisha leans forward. Her voice is quiet, but it has an edge. So what changed? Nothing changed, Inez says. She burned me anyway. She burned me without ever knowing what I knew. And now I realize I was never going to be safe. I was never going to be the exception. The story she told about me is the story she tells about everyone who gets too close to something she doesn't want to see. Sloane is silent for a long moment. Then she says something that shifts the entire room. She didn't just tell the bridal party. Inez looks at her. She told Patrick. The air in the room changes. It tightens. Inez feels it. A sudden compression, like the pressure drop before a storm. "What do you mean?" she told Patrick. Sloane pulls out her phone. She scrolls, finds something, hands it to Inez. It's a text thread between Sloane and Meredith from 2 days after the wedding. "Meredith, I talked to Patrick about it. He wasn't surprised. He said he'd noticed her looking at him a certain way too. He said it made him uncomfortable, but he didn't want to say anything because he knew how much I loved her." Inez reads the message once, twice, 3 times. Patrick, the man with the secret credit card and the secret apartment and the secret girlfriend of 2 years, looked his wife in the eye and told her that Inez had been making him uncomfortable, that he had noticed her looking at him, that he had been suffering in silence, protecting Inez out of loyalty to Meredith. He knew. He knew Inez had seen him at that restaurant. He must have known, or at least suspected, that she might say something eventually. And so he did what men like him always do. He got ahead of the story. He planted the seed before she could. He made Inez the threat, so that if she ever did come forward, Meredith would already have a framework for dismissing it. That's why Meredith told the story about Inez being jealous. That's why she told it at the wedding. Patrick had primed her. Patrick had weaponized her. And Inez, sitting on her evidence for 11 months, had handed him exactly the window he needed. Inez sets the phone down. She looks at Sloane. She looks at Keisha. She looks at the camera, at Tessa's face on the screen. "I'm going to tell her," she says. "But I'm not going to tell her in a way she can deny. I'm going to send her the file. All of it. And after that, whatever she does with it, that's not on me anymore." Nobody tells her not to. Nobody says, "Think about the friendship." The friendship is already gone. It was gone before the voicemail, before the wedding, before the 11 months of silence. It was gone the moment Meredith decided that protecting her own comfort mattered more than protecting the person who had protected her for 17 years. But I want you to notice something about what's about to happen. I want you to notice the one thing Inez still doesn't know. The one thing none of them know. Because it's sitting in that file, in the photographs Roberta took, in the records she compiled. And Inez has been looking at it for months without seeing it. And that detail, the one that seemed small, is the one that makes everything else make sense. The file is waiting on Inez's laptop, right where it has been for 11 months. She hasn't opened it in weeks. She opens it now. The photographs are first. Patrick and Lydia at a coffee shop, their heads close together. Patrick and Lydia at a hotel entrance, his hand on the small of her back. Patrick and Lydia in a park, sitting on a bench, her legs draped over his. These are not ambiguous. These are not up for interpretation. These are the kind of images that do not leave room for a counterargument. Then the financials. Roberta had been thorough. Too thorough, Inez thought at the time. But she isn't thinking that now. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, a lease agreement for a small apartment in Lydia's city, paid from an account Inez had never heard of, an account Patrick had been quietly feeding for years. Roberta had traced it back to a series of bonuses Patrick had received at work, bonuses he told Meredith he was putting into their retirement fund. The retirement fund, Roberta's notes confirmed, had not grown in 3 years. Inez scrolls through the file, and the 3 other women lean in. Sloane mutters something under her breath that Inez doesn't catch. Keisha just shakes her head, slow and deliberate, the way you shake your head at something that is almost too predictable to be shocking. Tessa, still on the video call, has gone completely silent. And then Inez sees it. She has looked at this file a dozen times. She has combed through every photograph, every receipt, every line of Roberta's meticulous documentation. But she has never seen this. Her eye has never caught it. Her brain has never assembled the pieces in quite this way. It's a photograph. One of the early ones, Patrick and Lydia at the coffee shop. It's dated. The timestamp is in the corner. And the date is not what she thought it was. Inez freezes. "What?" Sloane says. "What is it?" Inez doesn't answer. She is doing math in her head, calculations she should have done months ago, cross-referencing dates against a timeline that lives in her memory because she lived it. The engagement, the proposal, the night Meredith called her, voice breaking with joy, to say that Patrick had gotten down on one knee on a beach in the Outer Banks. She pulls up her calendar. She scrolls backward. She finds the date. Then she looks at the photograph again. The photograph was taken 3 days before the proposal. 3 days before Patrick knelt in the sand and promised Meredith forever. He was sitting in a coffee shop with Lydia Vance. Not arguing, not breaking things off, not doing any of the things a man would do if he were planning to commit his life to someone else. He was leaning in. He was holding her hand. He was exactly the same man Inez had seen in the restaurant, the one who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He didn't just cheat on Meredith. He proposed to her while actively, continuously, unambiguously involved with another woman. He looked her in the eye and asked her to marry him while his other life was fully operational. While Lydia was still right there. While the apartment lease was still active. While nothing had changed and nothing was going to change. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a man who got caught up in something and didn't know how to get out. This was a man who had constructed 2 parallel realities and was comfortable living in both of them simultaneously. The proposal was not an interruption of the affair. It was part of the architecture. Inez feels something cold settle into her chest. Not anger. That's still coming. This is something closer to awe. The terrible, vertiginous awe of realizing you have been standing next to a structure your whole life, and only now seeing what was holding it up. She scrolls further. She finds more dates, more intersections. Patrick took Meredith to meet his parents 2 weeks after spending a weekend with Lydia at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. Patrick helped Meredith pick out wedding bands 4 days after signing the renewed lease on the apartment. Every major milestone in Meredith and Patrick's relationship had a shadow version running alongside it. Every single one. And then Inez reaches the part of the file she had never fully processed before, the part about Lydia's family. Lydia had a husband named Russell. Lydia had 2 daughters, ages 10 and 12. Lydia had a whole life that looked, from the outside, entirely intact. But Roberta's notes included something Inez had skimmed past months ago and never really absorbed: interviews. Roberta had done more than photograph. She had talked to people, neighbors, co-workers, a former friend of Lydia's who had agreed to speak off the record. The marriage to Russell was not a secret arrangement. Russell knew about Patrick. He had known for over a year. And according to the friend, he had chosen to stay, not out of love, not out of hope, but out of a cold, pragmatic calculation involving custody, assets, and a prenuptial agreement that would leave him with almost nothing if he filed first. Lydia and Patrick were not an affair. They were a system. 2 people who had looked at their respective marriages and decided, separately and together, that they would maintain the public structures while conducting the real relationship in private. Russell was not a victim in the way Inez had assumed. Russell was a participant, a reluctant one maybe, but complicit. The whole thing was a closed loop, a sealed ecosystem of deception that had been running smoothly for years. And Meredith was the only one who didn't know. Inez closes the laptop. The room is silent. Sloane has her hand over her mouth. Keisha is staring at the floor. Tessa has turned her camera off, but Inez can hear her breathing, shallow, uneven. She doesn't just need to know about the affair, Inez says. She needs to know that the proposal was a performance, that the whole marriage is built on a lie that started before it even began, that the man she married chose her while he was actively choosing someone else. Sloane looks at her. "Are you going to send it?" Inez thinks about Meredith. She thinks about the voicemail. She thinks about the story that was told about her, the jealous bridesmaid, the untrustworthy friend, the woman who couldn't be left alone with the groom. She thinks about Patrick, sitting next to his wife, nodding solemnly as she described her concerns about Inez, agreeing that yes, he had noticed something too. He had felt uncomfortable. He was so sorry he hadn't said anything sooner. He knew Inez had seen him. He had to know. That's why he ran the play. That's why he planted the story before she could tell hers. He took her 17 years of friendship and turned it into a liability because he understood Meredith better than Inez ever did. He understood that Meredith would always choose the person who made her feel chosen. And he had been making her feel chosen since the day they met. "I'm not sending it yet," Inez says. "First, I'm going to do something Patrick never expected. I'm going to give him a chance to tell her himself." Inez doesn't call Patrick. She texts him. The message is 3 lines long. She writes it with Sloane still sitting next to her on the couch, with Keisha reading over her shoulder, with Tessa's breath still audible on the muted video call. No one tells her to change a word. "I know about Lydia Vance. I have documentation. You have 48 hours to tell Meredith yourself, and then I send her everything I have." She hits send. The room exhales. Inez expects a response within minutes, a flurry of denial, a counterattack, maybe even a threat. Patrick is a man who controls narratives. Men who control narratives don't sit still when someone threatens to expose them. But the minutes pass, then an hour, then 2. The response doesn't come. The 48 hours begin. Inez goes to work the next morning. She sits through a meeting about quarterly projections. She eats lunch at her desk. She answers emails. The whole time, her phone sits face up next to her keyboard, and the screen stays dark. Patrick doesn't call. Patrick doesn't text. Patrick has chosen silence. And silence, Inez realizes, is a choice too. It's the choice of a man who believes he can still win. Sloane calls her that afternoon with an update. Meredith has been posting on social media. Nothing unusual. A photo of the garden she and Patrick are planting. A video of the dog. A story about a new recipe she tried. The posts are breezy, domestic, unbothered. Meredith is behaving exactly like a woman who has not been told a single thing. "He hasn't said anything to her," Sloane says. "He's going to run out the clock." Inez already knows this. She knew it before she sent the text. But hearing it confirmed does something to her. Something that has been building since she stood in her kitchen and listened to that voicemail. The anger that has been waiting in the wings finally steps onto the stage. But here's what distinguishes Inez from the kind of person Meredith accused her of being. She doesn't let the anger drive. She lets it sit in the passenger seat while something else takes the wheel. Something older and steadier and far more dangerous to a man like Patrick. She waits, not out of fear this time, out of precision. The 48 hours are not a negotiation. They are a clock. And when the clock runs out, Inez will do exactly what she said she would do. Patrick's silence is not going to save him. It's going to bury him. Because when Meredith finally hears the truth, she will also hear that her husband was given 2 full days to come clean and chose not to. The 48th hour arrives. Inez is back on her couch. Sloane and Keisha are with her again. They have become, in the span of 2 days, a kind of war council. Tessa joins by video again, her face set in the same hard line. Inez opens her laptop. She opens the file, and she composes an email to Meredith. She doesn't write a long preamble. She doesn't explain why she waited. She doesn't defend herself against the accusations Meredith has been spreading. She includes exactly 3 things: a single sentence, the file, and an offer. Meredith, I should have sent this months ago. I'm sorry I didn't. If you want to talk after you read it, I'm here. No accusation. No demand for an apology. No reference to the voicemail or the wedding or the story about the jealous bridesmaid. Just the file. Just the truth. Just the door left open. Inez hits send before she can second-guess herself. Then she closes the laptop and sits in the quiet of her living room, surrounded by 3 women who were strangers 3 days ago and who are now, improbably, the witnesses to the hardest thing she has ever done. For a long moment, nobody speaks. Then, Keisha says, "She's going to call you." "Maybe," Inez says. "Maybe not." "If she doesn't," Sloane starts, "then I know everything I need to know." That's the sentence that lands. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, just with clarity. Inez has spent 17 years reading Meredith's silences, interpreting her moods, managing the emotional weather of a woman who treated friendship as a service she was owed. She is done interpreting. Whatever Meredith does next will be the truth. Not a story, not a retelling. The actual, observable truth of who she is when the person she wronged hands her the evidence anyway. The response arrives at 11:47 that night. Not a call, a text. A single line from Meredith. "I need to see you." And I want you to hold on to that message, because what happens when Inez walks into Meredith's house the next morning, what she sees, what she hears, and what Patrick does when he realizes the story he built is collapsing around him, is not the confrontation you are expecting. Because Patrick still had one move left, and it was the cruelest one he had. Meredith's house is 15 minutes from Inez's apartment. Inez has made this drive hundreds of times. She has never made it like this. The front door opens before she knocks. Meredith is standing in the doorway, and Inez sees immediately that she has not slept. Her eyes are swollen. Her hair is unwashed. She is holding her phone in one hand, and her grip on it is so tight that her knuckles are white. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. 17 years of friendship, and they are standing on opposite sides of a threshold, and the distance between them is not the 2 feet of concrete walkway. It is every lie Patrick ever told. It is every story Meredith chose to believe. It is the voicemail, and the wedding, and the word jealous, and the 11 months Inez carried a secret that was never hers to carry. "You read the file," Inez says. It is not a question. Meredith nods. Her voice, when it comes, is raw. "All of it." "Where is he?" "Upstairs." Meredith's jaw tightens. "He's been up there since last night. He knows you're coming." Inez steps inside. The house is the same house she has been in 100 times. The same furniture, the same photographs on the wall, the same throw blanket Meredith always kept on the back of the couch. But it feels different now. It feels like a set. Like the entire home was a stage, and someone has finally turned on the work lights. Patrick comes down the stairs before Inez reaches the living room. He is dressed. He is calm. He looks, impossibly, like a man who still believes he can manage the room. "Inez," he says, "I was hoping we could talk before this got out of hand." Sloane, who has come with Inez and is standing just behind her, makes a sound. A short, sharp exhale that is not quite a laugh. Patrick ignores her. His eyes are on Inez. "You should have come to me first," he says. "You didn't need to involve all these people. This could have been handled privately." Inez looks at him. She thinks about the text message Sloane showed her. He said he'd noticed her looking at him a certain way, too. and she feels the anger that has been riding in the passenger seat finally unlock the door. "You told your wife I was attracted to you," she says. "You told her I made you uncomfortable. You spent months planting that story so that if I ever came forward, she wouldn't believe me. And you're standing here telling me this could have been handled privately?" Patrick's expression doesn't change. That's the thing about him. That's the thing Inez will remember most clearly later. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't look away. He has been running parallel realities for so long that being confronted in one of them doesn't even rattle him. "You have no idea what my marriage is," he says. "You have no idea what Meredith and I have agreed to, or what we're working through, or what—" "Stop." It's Meredith. Her voice is quiet, but it cuts through the room like a blade. Patrick turns to her, and for the first time, something in his face shifts. A flicker, brief and quickly suppressed, of a man who has just realized the weather has changed. "Don't speak for me," Meredith says. "Don't you ever speak for me again." She looks at Inez, and Inez sees it. The thing she has been waiting 17 years to see. Not an apology, not gratitude, something more fundamental. Meredith is looking at her without the filter, without the story, without the version of Inez that was always too involved or too opinionated or too threatening to the fragile architecture of Meredith's choices. She is just looking at Inez. The way you look at someone when you finally understand what it cost them to love you. "I believe you," Meredith says. "I believe all of it." And then she does something Inez never expected. She turns to Patrick and she says, "I want you to leave. Tonight. I'll have my lawyer contact yours in the morning." Patrick stares at her. The mask is gone now. Not dramatically, not in some cinematic collapse. It just slips. For one unguarded second, Inez sees the real man underneath the charm. He is not angry. He is not heartbroken. He is calculating. He is running the math on how much this is going to cost him, and the calculation is the only thing he feels. "You're going to throw away 5 years because of a file she put together?" His voice is cold now, stripped of warmth. "You're going to believe her over me?" Meredith doesn't hesitate. "She waited 11 months because she was afraid I wouldn't. She was right. I wouldn't have. But I do now." Patrick looks at Inez one last time. Whatever he sees in her face, he doesn't try again. He walks to the door. He pauses with his hand on the frame, and Inez thinks he might say something. A final defense, a final manipulation, a final attempt to rewrite the story one more time. He doesn't. He walks out. The door closes behind him, and the sound of it is the quietest thing Inez has ever heard. Meredith sinks onto the couch. She doesn't cry. Not yet. The tears will come later, when the adrenaline fades and the reality of what she just ended settles into her bones. Right now, she is just sitting, still holding her phone, staring at the floor. "I don't know how to fix this," she says. "What I said about you, what I told people, I don't know how to take it back." Inez sits down next to her. She doesn't say it's okay, because it isn't. She doesn't say, "I forgive you," because forgiveness is a longer process than a single conversation, and she is not going to rush herself through it just to make Meredith more comfortable. That's not who she is anymore. That's not who she is ever going to be again. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen," Inez says. "You believed a story about me that you should have known was false. You told that story to other people. You let him use you to discredit me before I could tell the truth. That's going to take time." Meredith nods. She doesn't defend herself. That's new. That's different. The Meredith of 6 months ago would have had an explanation ready, a reason why her behavior was understandable, a context that made it less cruel. This Meredith just nods. "But I'm here," Inez says. "Right now, I'm here. and we can figure out the rest later. And here is the thing I want you to sit with. Because this is the part of the story that doesn't fit neatly into a revenge fantasy or a clean moral lesson. Inez didn't win. That's not what this was. She lost 17 years of believing her friendship was reciprocal. She lost the version of Meredith she thought she knew. She lost the time she spent protecting a secret that was never hers to hold. But she also got something she had never had before. She got to see Meredith choose the truth. Not easily, not immediately, but eventually. When it mattered most, when the evidence was in her hands and the man she had built her life around was standing in front of her, asking her to believe him one more time, she chose the truth. Some people never get that. Some people hand over the file, and the person they hand it to throws it in the trash and keeps the liar. And those people have to walk away knowing they did everything right, and it still didn't matter. Inez got to see Meredith believe her. That doesn't erase the betrayal. It doesn't rebuild the friendship overnight, but it is not nothing. It is a foundation, cracked, uneven, but present. And whether they build something new on it or choose to walk away from the rubble entirely, at least now they are both standing on the same ground. Now, if this story made you think of a friendship you lost, one where you were always the steady one, the one who showed up, the one who absorbed the impact, I want to point you toward an episode I made about a woman named Mara, who spent years believing she was the problem, only to discover her partner had been running the same kind of parallel life Patrick was. The details are different. The pattern is identical. It's linked at the end of this video, and I think you're going to see yourself in it. Because here's the thing about people like Patrick. People who build double lives, who tell different stories to different audiences, who make you feel chosen while they're actively choosing someone else. They count on your silence. They count on your shame. They count on you being too afraid of losing the relationship to tell the truth about what's happening inside it. Don't let them be right. People always show you who they are. Wettedy just slows it down. I'll see you in the next one.